as more and more reports come in of the abuse of participants of the global Sumud flotilla to Gaza, with even European governments condemning a video of Israeli Security Minister Ben Gvir, we wanted to remind people that these reports of sexual violence are not new, not in the slightest. Last year, I sat down with Anna Liedtke, a brave young journalist and activist who took part in the last humanitarian flotilla to Gaza and who faced serious sexual violence while in Israeli captivity. This is the first sit-down interview with Anna telling her story, and I want to note this is a conversation with serious and sensitive topics, so viewer discretion is advised. Stay tuned. Anna, welcome to Mad in Germany.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. I think maybe we can just start with the beginning of the flotilla, because at this point it was a few months ago. Could you run us through how it started for you, where you joined, when you decided to join, what were your motivations?
I decided to join last summer, where everyone was talking about the global Sumud flotilla, about the flotillas to Gaza. Everything was still kind of, there was lots of information going on, but at the same time, not really that much. It's just okay, in the next few weeks, month, we will go to Gaza. And I registered. I thought it would be great to join as a young woman, also as revolutionary, to bring in that perspective, mostly as a woman, to answer the sexualized violence that has been going on in mostly Zionist prisons, but anywhere in the Gaza Strip, because it's used to break the will of the Palestinian people, to abuse women. I thought those were the main points, and also to show practical international solidarity, because I think when there's a genocide going on, there's different ways you have to react to it as an activist. And also, I went as a journalist, so I was on the Conscience, the medics and journalistic boat, and to report on it. So to show international solidarity, but at the same time also, report on that, let the world know what's happening, because I feel mainstream media does not cover any of it.
Yeah, that's true. It was such a divide between what I was seeing on my social media screens and what I was seeing in the media, which was, practically nothing about the Sumud flotilla. So you were covering that for, you mentioned sexualized violence. I want to come on to that in a little bit, but you were covering it for the Sumud, for Perspectiva Online, right?
Yeah.
And I assume social media channels as well. And so what was it like, getting on this boat? What was it actually like, the flotilla experience? Because how long were you on the water for? Was it comfortable? Were you scared?
We started on September 30th from southern Italy. We were on the water for 8 days. Well, 7-8 days. On October 8th, we got intercepted by the IOF. And there were different feelings going on. So, of course, there was hope. We were very excited because when we started, we knew that the global Sumud flotilla was actually on their way. They were intercepted a day after we left from Italy. And at the same time, there were debates about ceasefire. So we thought maybe if there's a ceasefire in time, we can actually make it there. And then, of course, we also knew about the other missions. So this year, last year, 2025, the Handala, the Madeleine, they got intercepted.
Yeah.
And most of the missions before also got intercepted. So we kind of knew what we were going into, but at the same time, there was still lots of hope. And we were a pretty big boat with about 100 people. So, we thought maybe it would be different, but of course, also knowing it's still Israel, it's still the Zionist state who wants to hold the blockade on Gaza. So also not that realistic to actually get there. So I feel a mix of different feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the boat was not very uncomfortable. It was very interesting whenever so many people come together, live together. We organized our everyday life on the boat. We had different shifts for cooking, for cleaning, also for just tidying up, making sure that our commonly used space, which was the whole boat, is clean and no stuff's laying around. Because also when there's a storm, and you put stuff on the table and then the boat is just moving, then of course everything falls off. So you have to think about that, which I did not think about that much before. But yeah, it makes sense. And then we had our meetings every day to discuss everything, to get new information, new updates. And then as a journalist, there was also lots of recording to do, of course, lots of videos, lots of writing, interviewing other people, other participants on the conscience.
Exactly, yeah. And so as you got closer and closer, would you say the feelings changed from hope, or you were still hopeful you would get through? I remember there were reports that people were hoping to reach the shore of Gaza, but in the end, every boat was intercepted by the Israeli forces, right?
Yeah, all of them were intercepted. I mean, we prepared every day for the interception. So we had drone watch shifts every day, every night, to just see, okay, what's going on? Because, when there's lots of drones, usually that means you're getting closer and they're watching you.
So drone watch shift would be where you were people on the boat would kind of look out for drones. Yeah. Did you ever do that shift?
Yeah.
And what was the feeling like?
Well, I did it during the day, so it was not like during the night. But sometimes at night, I would sit with the other people, with the other participants outside, and it's a strange feeling because, well, imagine your everyday life here in Germany, and then you're on the boat looking out for drones that might attack or that do some kind of surveillance stuff. But in a weird way, you get used to it pretty fast because okay, that's my routine now. You could see a lot of stars. I remember that, seeing a lot of stars, and then thinking, hey, is this a drone? Is this not a drone? And then you could also see planets, which I never saw before because usually there's big cities. So yeah, it's an absurd feeling. But yeah.
And then, what happened the night you were intercepted? Was it night or daytime?
It was very early in the morning. I remember going to bed on October 7th and seeing there was some lights on the horizon, but we just thought it was like a oil platform kind of thing. So I remember seeing that before going to bed, and then the next morning we were woken up by the alarm around 4:45, 5 a.m. With the alarm that went on, and then our captain saying, yeah, they are here. This is not a drill, because usually when we did the trainings, she said, yeah, this is a drill. Don't worry, but pretend like it's not a drill. And then this time she said, this is not a drill. They're coming. And then we saw so many small boats approaching from exactly this oil platform. So we are guessing that they were kind of hiding behind that and just waiting for us to get closer so they don't have to make all the way. But I don't know. Obviously, there's many reasons for it. And then, they came with 2 helicopters on our boat.
And they landed on the boat with the helicopter? Or they dropped people down?
No, they just dropped the soldiers from the 2 helicopters onto the upper deck. And then on the lower deck, they came in with those, I think you called them Zodiacs, like those small military boats. The very small ones.
Like the little speedboats. Yeah. And were the soldiers armed?
Yeah.
So how many soldiers in total came on the boat?
I don't know, because they split up. So the first team from the helicopter, they directly went to the captain to take over the boat, because they drove us to Ashdod, the port in Israel, a little bit north of Gaza. And then, so I didn't know how many there were. And then some, we were sitting on the lower deck, so they came to us and looked at us and just made sure that they could see our hands, see that we have nothing dangerous in our hands.
And they were, holding guns.
Yeah.
What were you scared at that point?
No, I wouldn't say that I was scared. We trained for that moment. And then you're looking at this boat full of people screaming, we are medics, we are journalists, and knowing that the mission is completely covered by international law. There's nothing wrong that you're doing. And those people coming onto the boat, that they're responsible for killing all the children in Gaza, for committing this genocide, for this years of apartheid and occupation. And they are responsible, and they know exactly what they're doing. So in this moment, that you're on the right side of history.
But that doesn't mean that you might not be scared, right?
Yeah.
Like, because as you said, there are a lot of reports of Israeli forces killing people, innocent people, including journalists, right? So, I think luckily the world was watching you as well at that time. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case with so many Palestinian journalists, including a few who were killed. 3, I believe, were killed working for CBS just a few days ago. So they commandeered the boat and then took it to Ashdod?
Yeah.
And then, so what happened? Like, how long did that take? Mad in Germany has grown to be a platform where we can really talk about issues that the mainstream media, particularly in Germany, ignores, and provide a different, more critical perspective. If you appreciate that perspective and hearing the voices that we put onto the channel, then please consider donating to Patreon. They commandeered the boat and then took it to Ashdod?
Yeah.
And then, so what happened? Like, how long did that take?
I think...
Did they handcuff you?
Yeah, no, not on the boat. Well, not me, but some of the others were handcuffed.
Mm-hmm.
So yes and no. But yeah, so we were all on the lower deck. They went through the rows and looked at every one of us, and then they told us to sit in like different places. So just to mix us up, I don't know why. And then they controlled us once, so just checking any dangerous stuff from all the smokers. They took all the lighters away, but that was it for the moment. And then we were brought inside. We were brought inside to sit in the cafeteria, and then, we just sat there. We were not allowed to talk. We were not allowed to go to the bathroom. And then it was so ironic because then they said, we're not the bad ones. If you just do what we tell you, then we're the good ones.
Yeah. Interesting. And so they then took you to Ashdod, and that's a port city, right? And what happened then? Did they took you guys to prison? They kind of split you up?
Yeah. So they took us from the boat, and at that moment you knew that the treatment was different. They put down our heads. Handcuffed us on our back, so like pulled our hands up in the air. We all had our heavy backpacks. We took everything we had from the boat, and so it was kind of heavy having that on your back as well, and then being pushed down. They tried to cover our faces, and then we had to sit on this. I think the pictures were kind of going around online from the Global Summit Flotilla to just sit on this ground and kneel there. Yeah, we had to do that, and then they kind of sorted us by, not really by passports, but the ones with an Israeli passport, they brought them to a different place because they said that our mistake or we're guilty of entering Israel illegally, but it doesn't count for them because they're Israeli citizens. So,
interesting.
That's, I think, why they separated us, and then they took us into prison buses and drove us to prison.
And how far away was the prison bus? How did you feel when you were getting loaded onto that bus?
It felt completely weird, and that was a moment where, okay, we don't know what's going to happen because the treatment at the port was different than it was on the boat, and then we didn't know. So the lawyers told us that probably we will be sent to Ketziot, but not every one of us saw a lawyer. But I was screaming, I need a lawyer at the port, and then a lawyer came, and then she asked me, hey, do you need a lawyer? And then the soldier who was guiding me was like, no, she doesn't need a lawyer. No one needs a lawyer here. And then I was like, well, I need a lawyer. And then the lawyer was very pushing herself onto me. And I was like, yeah.
And that was an Israeli lawyer?
From Adala. So they're allowed to work in Israel, but they're mostly for Palestinian minority rights.
I see. And what did she tell you?
She told me that the Global Summit Flotilla participants were sent to Ketziot, so that probably we will also be sent there, but that she doesn't have any more information.
So they were still imprisoned when you guys arrived?
I don't know, actually. I think it must have been around the time that they got released. Most of them. A couple of them we met in prison because they were still there when we arrived there. There was one Spanish participant. She, maybe you've seen it, she was accused of biting a soldier or prison guard, which she claimed was not true. But yeah, I mean, the soldier said she bit one of them. So that's why they took her into solitary confinement for a couple of days.
And what kind of cell did they put you in?
It was a cell where Palestinian prisoners were also held. Not at the time, but yeah. So we were transferred there, and then from what was on the walls, like calendars marked into the walls, you could tell that there's Palestinian prisoners who have been there for years, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard the story from the British Palestinian journalist Kieran Andreou. I hope I said his name right. And he said he was put in one of the same cells that his brother was probably put in, or it was in the same prison, So quite a harrowing experience, I imagine. So, what happened? How long did they keep you in the cells? What happened when you were in there? Because I've heard reports of them shouting stuff. In your own case, you experienced quite a lot.
Yeah, well, they came to us in the night, waking us up every hour, I would say, but I'm not sure because we didn't have any watches. We just could tell if it's light outside or dark outside.
And they were kind of banging on the cells, or
yeah.
Were they shouting things at you?
Yeah, mostly in Hebrew. We later learned that it was rape threats, but we didn't know at the time. Yeah.
And you mentioned you came there to report on and raise awareness about sexual violence as a young woman. You yourself experienced sexual violence, as many people around the world will have seen the video of you talking at the conference very bravely about this. Can you talk us through what happened to you?
So this Friday, 2 days later, we were transferred to another prison, Givon. So you have to imagine, Ashdod is here when you look at Palestine, and then Ketziot is in the desert bordering Egypt, and then Givon is kind of close to Tel Aviv, so it's up in the more northern part again. So we were driven around a lot, and then during the transfer, they put us into different small cells. Like, it was not regular prison cells, but
kind of individuals, or
no, we were all together
right.
in this house. And then so I came into one cell, and then there were 10 women. So we were separated by gender the whole time. And we came in there, and then they took another one of us out and then put us in a different cell, so just to mix us around. And then there was a scanner, kind of like at the airport, just security. And then we saw our bags, and then they told us we're going home, so we didn't know really what's going on. And then during those transfers, also from the port to Ketziot, they did the strip searches. So they, first you had to go to a doctor, and then they put us on a scale, and then they measured our blood pressure, and then they asked if we have any allergies, and they were like, yeah, that's it.
While you're naked?
No, before that, but then I feel like those are often combined. Arriving in Ketziot, it was at the same time. So it was also a male doctor just standing there. And then in Givon, there was also those strip searches, not in a single room. It was more like a curtain. And there were so many male soldiers, masked, heavily armed, just standing there, laughing at us. Probably really, and it's so disgusting, enjoying the fact that, they have the power over us in that moment.
They wanted to humiliate you, you felt?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same as what they do with Palestinians, just in a not as strong.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of reports of sexual violence against Palestinians. So they take you. You're in the third prison. You've been moved around. They take you to the kind of medical area where they want to do a strip search. And what happened to you then?
I told them that it hurts because they were a few women in the cell, so female guards, while the male guards were watching through this curtain, which was kind of see-through and it didn't close fully. So yeah, and they told me to take off my clothes. I told them I didn't want to. And
you
then,
had already been searched, right?
Yeah,
Previously.
I mean, they checked us all the time. We had the same clothing. They didn't give us
So there was no actual security reason to strip search you again?
No, of course not. It was purely humiliation. There was no reason for it. And they checked us at the port. They checked us then in Ketziot arriving there. So imagine you're at the port, they check us. They put us on the prison bus. They take us out the prison bus directly to the next check. So yeah, it's really just about humiliation and just a demonstration of power. Just saying, okay, you are here. We treat you as terrorists, and we decide what's going on. But they held my hands, so I couldn't really move, and then they pushed me down, so I was in kind of the squatting position, and then they penetrated me with their fingers.
And these were the female guards.
Yeah.
And they did that because they said, that was part of the strip search.
I mean, it happened after I repeatedly told them that they're hurting me, and that I don't want to be in this position. So I had the feeling it came because because I resisted, or I told them, hey, I don't want to do this, which of course they do not care about. But in this position, what else are you going to do? So I told them, hey, you're hurting me. Please stop touching me. And then, the last thing I remember is the male guards from outside just laughing, which is, even more part of the humiliation part.
Wow. And how did that make you feel at that time? And what about afterwards?
I didn't really realize what was happening, which is also part of why I talked so late about it, because this happened in October, and then 2 months later at the Political Prisoners Conference in Paris, the week before Christmas, I talked about it, because I didn't really realize what was just happening. So it took me a while to process, and then also some more time to decide whether I want to make it public or not.
Sure. I mean, you're not the only person who had experiences like this on the flotilla, right? There was an Italian journalist as well, male, and a number of other people. And, this speech at the prisoners' conference that you gave, it went quite viral because, and I thought this was the really, one of the really impressive bits was you said, I'm not here, I'm not ashamed because I didn't do anything wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is also, they tried to humiliate me by doing that to me, but I mean, by just making it obvious what they did, it's also obvious who should be ashamed. So, yeah.
You were trying to help people. Why should you be ashamed that they tried to humiliate you, even going as far as, to penetrate you sexually without your will?
Yeah.
I think it's like a we the bad guys moment, it should be. But, you can see how much impunity there is around the Israeli prison system. I mean, what would you say to people who say that, Hamas are rapists and Israelis, they are just fighting terrorism? I'm thinking particularly of Carolina Preisler, who's this activist, Zionist activist who goes out with a rape is not resistance sign to protests. What would you say to her?
Nothing ever justifies that. And I don't think you have to mention Hamas to condemn sexual violence. Because what we did has, our mission did not have anything to do with Hamas. We were there to break the blockade. And you don't need to talk about Hamas to condemn this violence, this prison system, because nothing can ever justify that. It's a genocide, and no matter what Hamas did or did not do, and of course the other thing is there really are lots of examples on how it was just false propaganda. I think very famously there's the one about the killed babies, where
the 40 beheaded babies, right? That was definitely disproven and still gets repeated in German media, I believe, to this day, including in the Taz. Of course, on this podcast, we don't try. I think it's definitely fair to say that Hamas committed war crimes, right? But what do you think about this idea that Israel is which is a very common idea in mainstream, the right wing in Germany, that Israel are just fighting terrorism? Would they have done that to you if they were just interested in fighting terrorism?
Of course not. I mean, if they were just trying to fight terrorism, and they could have let us in. I mean, it's really not about terrorism. It's also, if you look at Lebanon, it's not about the Hezbollah, because Israel started the war way before Hezbollah was founded. Israel started the occupation of Palestine, of Gaza, way before Hamas was founded.
I think that's an important point that a lot of people forget, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, they're fighting Hamas. Well, back then, Hamas, actually, they funded Hamas, right? In the beginning, in the early years, partially they funded Hamas, Israel. But, this isn't quite a podcast on Palestine, and there's a lot of excellent podcasts out there about that. So I don't know if we need to go into the full history of the conflict in that region. But you came out, you gave this speech about your experiences, and where you also brought attention to that Palestinians suffer from that all the time. Now, I believe it was the UN was threatening Israel to put it on the list of countries that have a problem with massive sexual violence in the prison system, right? Were you, and you spoke very passionately and intelligently about your experience. Did people from German media reach out to you afterwards?
Not a lot. I wrote a press statement, also as Zora, but
Zora's the activist organization that the speaker for.
The Young Women's Organization. We sent out press statements. There was little to no answer. We kind of expected something like this, but also we wanted it to be kind of big in German media, because this is also a way to fight Germany's complicity in this genocide. Because you see what happens if you fund this genocide, your own people are treated like this.
Right. And that's the bit that kind of surprised me as well, because I saw, the speech went quite viral. It got picked up by, I guess, Dropsite, TRT, quite a lot of international media which covers Palestine. But I just think, a German citizen being sexually abused, raped in Israel, who was just there for a humanitarian mission, that should be front page news, right? So what kind of, it was only really leftist media that reached out to you, right?
Yeah.
So do you have a message for German media that you would say, about why haven't they covered your story?
I think it's obvious it doesn't fit in this image of the Palestinians being the bad ones and Israel being the good ones, because it really shows, okay, this is not about terrorism, this is not about Hamas. If they do if they do something like this to German media, to German citizens, and the role that media plays in it is also very simple. It's the so-called Staatsräson in Germany.
The reason of state. Yes.
Yeah.
This idea that we have to, that Germany's role is to support Israel because of historical responsibility. But, shouldn't the media be independent of that and of state doctrines?
It should be, but it's not. I mean, we can talk about Axel Springer Verlag with Bild, etc.
Yeah, it's a very powerful media organization that actually has support for Israel's to exist in its core principles. At this point, I would point out that legally there's no such thing as a right to exist. Like, it's not a doctrine from international law. There's the right to self-determination.
Yeah. And they're also profiting from the settlements, the illegal settlements in the West Bank, which is also then kind of obvious why they just want to have that in a certain frame or a certain image of, okay, those are the good ones, those are the bad ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so after this experience in prison, you came back, you spoke, like, did you feel strange coming back to normal reality in a sense, coming from Israel, getting close to Gaza?
I mean, yeah, it's a different situation that you find yourself in. But I think right after coming back, it was very clear that the struggle continues. We were liberated, yes, the prisoners, inmates from the flotilla, but Palestine is not free, and all the Palestinian prisoners are not free. So it was very clear that after I came back, my struggle had to continue. And that's what I did. So I took to the streets as an activist, writing also about my journey. And then, of course, after I made the statement, or I gave the speech at the conference, it came up more and more. But I think until this blockade does not exist anymore, until this occupation does not exist anymore, there's still a whole lot that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. And so you came back, and your struggle, as you put it, you're part of this organization Zora. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I have, of course, seen your work, and I want to talk about a particular incident of repression you guys experienced a few years ago. But I'd be happy to hear, what is Zora for people who haven't heard?
So I will start from the beginning when Zora was founded. It was in Western Germany, in Cologne, exactly 10 years ago, because some may remember the New Year's Eve or night in Cologne, 2015-16.
So-called Kölner Silvester, where there were reports of a lot of sexual assaults by migrants, refugees on women.
Yeah.
Right. And it became a big thing in the media. They still call it the Kölner Silvester.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really big. And instead of calling it by the name of patriarchal violence, they just, the police didn't do anything to protect women.
In fact, there were almost no charges brought, as I understand it, because at that time, the laws on sexual harassment in Germany were so loose that it wasn't actually illegal, a lot of what happened.
Yeah. And the other thing they did is just have this huge campaign, this hate campaign against migrants. Because in the years, especially in the year 2015, a lot of refugees came to Germany. Also, of course, because of what Germany did in the Middle East. Then a lot of refugees came, and there was this whole debate on, just können wir das schaffen? Like, can we do it? As like
The
Germany,
Merkel phrase, yes.
Germany taking in lots of refugees or migrants. And instead of facing this patriarchal violence, it was just a racist thing, talking about, okay, migrants are all like this and migrants are all like that.
So Zora actually came about as a reaction to that, and you wanted to bring a different perspective, saying basically the problem isn't migrants, the problem is men and the patriarchy.
Yeah, the problem is patriarchy. And patriarchy is not... The origin of patriarchy is not in the Middle East or just outside of Europe. And
sure,
where you come from does not make you more patriarchal, or does not make you violent as a man.
And so, one thing so coming on to this incident, Zora was it 2023, was raided in Berlin, I think 8 different locations because of a flyer.
Yes.
Partly or entirely, right? And so, as well as being, I guess, anti-racist, I would call it feminist, but I know you guys don't quite like that term. you also are very involved in campaigning for internationalist struggles. So, for example, Palestine, Kurdistan, and I hope we'll get to talk about that a little bit later, because it's quite current. And I feel like there was this raid. What happened there? It was about a slogan which was interpreted as pro PFLP.
Yes, so it was in December 2023, so a few weeks after October 7th. And especially in Berlin, there was so much going on. And of course, also the question of sexual violence. Which side does it come from? What role does it play? Was heavily discussed.
October 7th, there were initially quite a lot of reports of sexual violence. Some of them were later retracted.
Yeah. So
media organizations, including the New York Times podcast, for example, they refused to re-report some of the stories.
Yeah, it was kind of big. Everyone talked about it. And then as a young women's organization, we thought, okay, we need to have a stand on that, have a position on that. So we said, well, there's also other organizations that, and I'm quoting this from the flyer. I don't remember the correct sentence, but it said something like, for example,
more progressive. I looked at this just before, and from what I remember is that it said, Hamas are committing patriarchal violence, something like that, and then we need to strengthen or support more progressive forces like the PFLP.
Yeah, or even I think a little less.
Maybe less than support.
Yeah, it was, or could be supported. Something like this. So yeah.
Of course, the PFLP, who are sort of leftist Palestinian militia, who work with Hamas right now, they are considered a terrorist group in the EU, right?
Yeah. So
that was the justification they gave for the raid, the German police. I mean, you can question how proportional that is, right? Because one slogan on a flyer, does that really mean you need to raid 8 locations in Berlin?
Of course not.
What happened after that? And, was anyone charged with this? Because, support for terrorism, it is a serious offense in a way.
Yeah. It is still going on, but they could not prove it because it's just not
It
enough.
wasn't as direct, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't go PFLP or something like that.
Yeah, it was rather freedom of speech, even though there's lots of things that are covered by freedom of speech.
Sure.
Even stronger formulations or sentences that you could publish. But
I mean,
so it's still going, this whole case.
And what do you think? So what are the things the group are doing now? I've noticed you guys have been growing on social media. You have locations in other stuff, but one thing you wanted to talk about was the Kurdish women's support for Kurdish women.
Yes. So we see ourselves as internationalists because, as I said, patriarchy is not just rooted in one country or, it's a global system. And we see how it affects women worldwide, how it also affects LGBTI worldwide, because it presses us into those, or pushes us into those gender roles of the woman to be the wife who stays at home and takes care of the children, and then the man goes to work, or maybe more currently goes to war, and then the woman has to either also liberally or liberatingly also go to the front or stay at the house and take care while the man is at war. So this is also something that they want to sell to us. But we see patriarchy as a global system that has its effects everywhere, and it shows in different ways. So of course the situation here in Germany is different than it is in the US or in the Middle East, but that doesn't mean that it's not rooted in the same cause.
And where does Kurdistan fit in with this?
There's a women's revolution going on.
What does that mean in that?
So during the civil war in Syria, in the Arab Spring uprisings, the region of northeastern Syria was declared an autonomous self-administered area.
Rojava.
Rojava. And ever since then, they've tried to build. So they were fighting against ISIS, which is, I think, the most important part. They defeated ISIS in that region. Most importantly, cities like Kobani, who are attacked now. But ever since then, they also established some just successes. For example, there's women courts for dealing with patriarchal violence, because it's so absurd when you look at it here. The I don't know how to say it in English, Betroffene.
The people affected or the victims.
Because in German, Opfer and Betroffene, there's a difference.
I understand that. I don't think we have quite a good enough word for it. Right.
Let's stick with victims then. But they have to prove that this patriarchal violence existed. And rather than doing that, they established that people believe the woman or the affected woman, and put the perpetrator into the position where he has to prove that he did not do it. And so this is, I think, a change in thinking, but also in a way that patriarchal violence.
So they changed the system in Kurdistan and how.
I mean, there's many more stuff. So
so for example, the units, there's Kurds have female fighters, right? But that's actually something that people criticize as well in the region. They say it's PKK terrorism. They say, why do you want to send women to fight and die, right? What do you think about that?
It's women defending themselves against ISIS, against people who attack them, against the Turkish state, Turkish fascist state, who is attacking the revolution every day. And I think to talk more about what have those women accomplished, it's them being included on all the different levels. So they're organized in a way where it's not you have the ruling class and then you have the proletarian class, but in like those, what's Räte in English?
Councils.
Yeah, and in councils. So they organize in councils, which is...
It's this idea of democratic confederalism, right? Which comes from Abdullah Öcalan's theory, And, I of course remember when this happened, and you mentioned Kobani, there was a large siege against that by ISIS. And of course, the Kurds were backed by US air power at that point. And, so a lot of people would say right now, well, some people would say that, the Kurds worked a lot with Western powers and that, they did amazing work to fight against ISIS, of course, and liberate parts of Syria. But at this point, the civil war's been won. Isn't it time for them to work with the Syrian National Army and kind of create a single party, single state? Yeah.
First of all, I would not say that the US, for example, played that big of a role. Most of that the Kurdish self-defense units did themselves. And then, of course, they accepted help from the US, and there's different opinions on that. But I think it's important to say that this is not an imperialist project, which is an argument that many use to say it's not justified to show solidarity with the Kurdish fighters. So I would say that. And to the first question, and I think now if we look at it, of course under Assad the situation was clear. Minorities had no rule in that. And then that's
Kurds
why
have been oppressed all across the Middle East by various different countries, right? Of course.
Yeah, I mean it's split up into 4 countries. So Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and they all oppress the Kurdish people. But I mean, under Assad we saw that, and then after Bashar al-Sharaa,
Al-Sharaa,
after
the
Bashar,
current interim leader. Supposedly
Yeah.
interim leader.
Yeah, after he took over, of course you could see that the situation did not get better.
I mean, he did bring in Kurdish language rights quite recently, no? Which was one of the main demands from the Kurdish movement.
Yeah, he did that to still have a little bit support because, of course, he's backed by imperialist forces.
Well, he's backed by Turkey more than any other, right?
Yeah, that too, because you have the
regional power.
proxy militia, the SNA, the Syrian National Army, who are funded by Turkey, but also you have the HTS,
which was the group that he came out of when he was known as al-Sharaa, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so you have that, and then you see the massacres against Kurdish people, against minorities living there. And then I think the question kind of becomes obsolete if it wouldn't make more sense for the SDF to join them.
The SDF is the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is a Kurdish-controlled militia, which is currently retreating effectively in Syria. And you believe basically that we need to support women throughout the world and the Middle East.
I think our task
West Asia, as we should call it, probably.
I think it is our task to stand with the oppressed people of the world. That's why I also think it's important to talk about Palestine and Kurdistan at the same time, because this is not a contradiction. So you can talk about it at the same time, because what makes it so similar is it's both oppressed people being oppressed, being occupied, demanding their liberation, fighting for their liberation. And then you see how imperialists, and also coming again back to mainstream media, coming back to also German media, of course, blaming one of them or labeling one of them, one of the sides as a terrorist and the other one as we need to establish peace in this region, and it cannot be done if the Kurds are controlling the region.
Interesting. Anna Liedtke, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your views and your experiences on Mad in Germany.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. If you are, please consider supporting Mad in Germany on Patreon so that we can continue to cover the topics that the mainstream media refuses to.